me, Kolkata মানে হচ্ছে city of culture, city of heritage and city of surprises. আমি উজান মুখার্জি, আপনাদের গাইড, but I call myself an explorer. লোকে বলে প্যারিস ভালোবাসার শহর, আর আমি বলি কলকাতা প্যাশনের শহর।
শহর জুড়ে যেন প্রেমের মৌসুম, আলোতে মাখামাখি আমার গ্রিন রুম। কখনো নেমে আসে অচেনা প্যারাশুট, তোমাকে ভালোবেসে আমার চিরকুট। কলকাতা, তুমিও হেঁটে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও ভেবে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও হেঁটে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও ভেবে দেখো যাবে কি না যাবে আমার সাথে। ভাঙে চিনে বাদাম, ঘুম ভাঙে এসপ্ল্যানেড, খোলা ভাঙে চিনে বাদাম, চেনা কোনো ঘাসের দাগ, শুয়ে থাকা কি আরাম।
শহরে জুড়ে যেন প্রেমের মরশুম, তোমাকে ভালোবেসে আমার চিরকুট।
কলকাতা, তুমিও হেঁটে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও ভেবে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও হেঁটে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও ভেবে দেখো যাবে কি না যাবে আমার সাথে।
দিতে না পারলে আড়ি আমার ব্যোমকেশ বক্সির বাড়ি, তবে তোমার কথা কলকাতা কলকাতা সব কিছু মেনে নিতে পারি।
কেন এ অসম্ভবে ডেকে আনো আমাকে, ছুঁয়ে থাকো হাতটাকে, কবিতার ছাদটাকে। কলকাতা, তুমিও হেঁটে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও ভেবে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও হেঁটে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও ভেবে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও হেঁটে দেখো কলকাতা, তুমিও ভেবে দেখো যাবে কি না যাবে আমার সাথে।
So, কেমন আছেন? A very good morning to everyone watching this second round of our webinar series that we've started on 14th of April. We kicked on with the first one, and this is the second one in the series, and we hope that you are as excited as we are to bring this to you. I started looking at what was I going to speak about Calcutta, and I was told I have about a couple of minutes because Our presenters also have so much to say. And then I ran into a problem because there is so much to say about Calcutta, so much to say about Bengal. There is no dimension that this beautiful city does not encompass in its vast history and culture and heritage. And that's why it's not known as the cultural capital of India. It is for all these reasons. The one amazing thing that I found as I was looking through Calcutta was the culture of the padas, those little neighborhoods. And that's when I understood why so many thought processes. And when we used to say the first idea that ever comes into India actually comes from Calcutta. So that's where these came from. These were the melting pots of intellectual thought, agreeing and disagreeing. And that's what Calcutta came to embody for the entire India. And a strong sense of community got created in these paras, and I think created a certain amount of affinity for their own culture and language. And I was looking at some comments coming as to why we ran the music, the first song in Bengali. What better way to link with a local culture than its own language? And that's why we chose the song in the local language. Looking at the other traditions, folk and contemporary, looking at authors, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Rabindranath Tagore, the list was endless. I started looking at social reformers, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Swami Vivekananda, who has not heard of him? Again, the list was endless. If I looked at freedom fighters, who can we not remember but Subhash Chandra Bose, and then again, the list was endless. I started looking at theater, films. Again, the list was endless. And so I'm just naming therefore a few: Satyajit Ray, Mrinal Sen, Gautam Ghosh. And I think our Bollywood is full of so much talent that came to us in 60s, Joy Mukherjee, and then down till now, Kajol, Rani Mukherjee. So I think there is no aspect that Bengal and Calcutta has not brought into all parts of India. The terracotta art of the Hindu temples. Then we went to see the museum in Red Fort here, and I discovered that the father of modern Indian art was none other than Abindranath Tagore. If I looked at music and dance, the fantastic and amazing tradition of the kirtan, and then even the modern day bands, the ball music, so much to see and so much to learn. And how can I forget the most interesting and the most colorful and the most followed festival, the Durga Pujo, that brings not only entire Bengal and Calcutta, but I think the entire India together for those days that we get together. And when the Durga goddess is prayed, the prayers mark the victory of her, the 10 armed golden goddess Durga, over the demon, signifying the victory of the good over the evil. I fortunately had a chance to go to Calcutta in September, and I was told, do not miss Kumartoli. And I'm glad I didn't miss it. What an amazing street to walk through. You think you're going to go there for 10 minutes. You cannot leave that place at least for 2.5, 3 hours. Watching the artisans craft the masks is such an amazing, amazing experience. And I encourage all of you to do that the moment COVID is behind us and we are again safe to travel. The recently concluded festival, the New Year, the Poila Baishak, again, I think the list of festivals was itself so endless that I think we'll have to do at least, if not more, 10 webinars only dedicated to Bengal. And last but not the least, how can the cuisine be forgotten? The mishti doi, the sandesh, the rasgulla, and again, the list is endless. But then the one statement that stuck out of all the macher jhols and everything was mache bhate Bengali. And I tried to find a literal loose kind of a translation of that and said, fish and rice is what makes a Bengali. And I think that says a lot about the culture. So I think we have a lot of interesting things that our presenters are going to be sharing with all of you today. All I can say, if you haven't been to that part of India, the east of India, to this beautiful and colorful and deeply cultural city of ours. Please visit it as soon as you can. In the meantime, satark rahiye, swasth rahiye, join hands with the government, follow all the instructions. Let's beat COVID 19. Let's be safe. Let's be healthy. I'm going to now pass the screen because these are times of technology. So I'm not passing the mic, but the screen to my regional director from Calcutta, Sagnik Chaudhary, who's going to introduce you the team that we have today, who's going to present the amazing Calcutta before you. Thank you very much for joining us once again.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that beautiful introduction to the city of joy. You have encapsulated very aptly the spirit of Kolkata, the city that we live by. Some would argue that it's not even a city, it's an experience that you have to immerse yourself in to actually realize, to actually live that. Uh, uh, I can see that in our webitorium, we have about 2,000 participants already, and the number is increasing by the second. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers for the day. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Iftikhar Hassan and Mr. Anirban Datta from Calcutta Walks, who are going to present to you the cultural milieu, the melting pot, the confluence of cultures, the city of joy, Kolkata. Over to Mr. Hassan. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Brar. You are, I think, in love with Calcutta. It just shows in your appreciation of the city. It's fabulous. But that is how Calcutta is. When the moment it touches you, you just cannot get rid of it for the rest of your life because it just stays with you forever. It's just a beautiful, beautiful city. Now, welcome everyone. Thank you, India Tourism, for doing this. We've been quite jobless few days ever since the international flights stopped coming into India. We've literally had all nothing to do. But this is a great opportunity to have more than 2,000 people online right now, wanting to learn and discover Calcutta, because that's my favorite city. The old saying, money flies in Calcutta. You just need to catch it. And my grandfather came here to catch. He came here from a town called Sikar in Rajasthan. And we've been here since 3 generations, Marwari speaking Muslims, a very small group of people, less than 1,000 people. But we have become so integrated and so in love with the city that we feel much more at home here than we feel back home in Rajasthan. And that's the beauty of Calcutta. So what we're going to do this today is we are focus on there are many aspects of Calcutta. If you we've kind of we've worked with movie directors, we've worked with writers, we've worked with photographers, we've worked with so many different people, and we've seen the city from so many different perspectives that we feel that the love of Calcutta, beyond the obvious, must also be shared in all these byproducts and by stories and these smaller communities and these smaller uh, uh, colors that make the fabric of Calcutta such an enticing and such a fascinating tapestry. And that is what we are going to do with you today. We are going to share a quick succession of slides, which is going to talk about all the different communities settled in Calcutta. Now, back in the day, there was, when the British first came in, they created what was then called the White Town, a huge sprawling city with uh, wide streets, with wide big pavements, with sewage facilities, with street lights, which was gas lights back then, with all the works of a European city that they wanted to create in Calcutta, which they successfully did. And so much so that it started being called the second city of the empire, started being called the most important city outside of London. It was called the second city of the empire. It was all of the Eastern Hemisphere was governed from Calcutta. So it became quite a prominent city. And of course, now we all know that that happened at the cost of the country. While the country was being impoverished, Calcutta was the one gaining in prominence. That's how colonization works. So when that happened, then the British were very comfortable, or the Europeans rather, were very comfortable in the White Town. And they pushed all the native residents northwards towards what they called the Black Town. And as Mrs. Brar was saying, that the festivals, so that's where the hub of festivals was, in the Black. And that's why the saying Baro Mash Parbon. So 12 months, 13 festivals. But I say it's more like 1300 and not just 30. 13 is too little for Calcutta. So there's a festival every week. So in between the white and the black town, where the Bengalis were and where the British were, was this encapsulated space in between, which nobody planned, which nobody thought would happen, but just happened organically, and that started being referred to as the Grey Town. Now, nobody used these names officially, but they were always there. They were always being used as nomenclatures for these different parts of the city. And the Black Town, of course, was very prominent because it didn't have any of the facilities. It didn't have any of the sewage system. They had the sewer ditches, so that you had to take the night soil and dump them into ditches. And there was no narrow lanes and not much access. And as they said, there was no regularity of construction as was in the White Town, because White Town buildings were inspired by European architecture. So in between the two, we are going to talk about this little space in between the two, which we usually cover in a span of about a 3-hour walk, which we call the Confluence of Cultures walk. And we are going to cover these in those 3 hour of walking. In there's less than 3 kilometers of walking, we cover not one, not two, but at least 15 to 20 different communities, some of which we are going to bring to you today through a slideshow. Now, please allow me to share my screen and start with this. I hope all of you can see the screen. Those of you who can't will have to refer to the YouTube link that will be passed a little later. So, once again, thank you, Ministry of Tourism, for doing this. Now, who we are. So Calcutta Walks was started about 13 years ago, when some of my friends came down and they wanted to see the city. And I said, let's go and see the city. And they had such a great time. I had such a great time that I said, why not do it as a business? So that was 13 years ago. And since then, we've tried our best to be as much of a responsible and sustainable business as possible, trying to give back to the city in as many ways as possible, doing social campaigns, doing campaigns to help the city, the life in the city, and some campaigns that are not related to our line of work at all, but we just love doing them because we are so much in love with the city that it sounds like a no-brainer. And then what we did was, because our walks were so popular and everyone who was coming on the walks was like, we would like to see a building restored with the same excitement that you show for your walk. So we went and bought an old house in North Calcutta, in Sham Bazaar area, and converted that into a bed and breakfast. So please go online, just Google Calcutta Bungalow, and you will get tons of links and articles which talk about Calcutta Bungalow and what we've done. We are very, very proud of that tiny little property. It's just a 6-bedroom B&B, but we are really proud of it. And each room is themed after a different neighborhood of the city. So please go have a look. I'm sure anyone in love with Calcutta will love that space. Now, we start with Mirza Ghalib, my favorite Urdu poet, a Delhiite, another Delhiite in love with Calcutta besides Mrs. Brar. So Mirza Ghalib, when he came trying to seek his pension in Calcutta in the early 80s, one of the houses that he stayed in on Ramdullah Sarkar Street in North Calcutta. But his observations of Calcutta back in the early 1800s stand true even today. And that's the most amazing thing, that after 200 years, not much has changed. So he said, one of the first things he observed was, he said that the Bengalis are a strange lot because they live 100 years in the past and 100 years in the future at the same time. So that was, I think, a very interesting observation, because a lot of people observing the Bengali people can still say that yes, they are a lot who do have a very traditional setup. and yet at the same time very, very modernistic outlook. And then he said when he went back and he was reminded of Calcutta, uh, he said he wrote a couplet in his trademark poetry style. He wrote a couplet in which he said, "कलकत्ते का जो जिक्र किया तूने हम नशी, एक तीर सा सीने में मारा के हाय हाय." So he missed Calcutta so much. He said he's very glad to be in Calcutta. He's thankful to the Lord that a city like Calcutta exists. And he said if he didn't have the responsibilities of a family, he would have immediately moved to Calcutta and settled down, not for anything else, but just for the mangoes of Calcutta. So that's Mirza Ghalib for you. We have a street named after him today, and our was earlier called the Free School Street is named after him. And recently we concluded a 1 week Mirza Ghalib festival also at the Urdu Academy here. So we love him as much as he loved us. Now, as I was telling you that there are so many communities that fell between Bengali and the British that called Calcutta home. I would like to enumerate some of them and then maybe talk a little bit about each of these communities because they are all so fascinating. So as you can see, number one on the list is the Buddhists, the Anglo-Indians, the Parsis, the Jains, the Christians, which includes Protestant Orthodox, then the Kabuliwalas of Afghanistan, made immortal by Rabindranath Tagore in his short story, from Iraq and Syria, Armenians from Julfa in Iran, Greeks, Tibetans, Nepalis, Bhutias, Lepchas, Marwaris, Gujaratis, Biharis, Odiyas, UPites, Malayalis, Telugus, Kannadas, and the list goes on and on and on. And all this we see in the course of a 3-hour walk. You know, our visitors are bamboozled at the end of it. They just love the experience and they go back with great memories of the city as a great sign of tolerance and coexistence and solidarity when so many problems can actually happen. So the mosque you see in the back, largest mosque of the city, it's called the Nakhuda Mosque, and the Nakhuda stands for a mariner or a seafarer, and it was made by Gujarati Muslim seafarers. So in the 19th, moving on. So the first place we go to is called the Bengal Buddhist Association in the coast of, and here we talk about Buddhism. We talk about how, in spite of India being the birthplace of Buddhism, not even a percentage of our population is Buddhist today. So few Buddhists in India, and they are so-called for various historical reasons, but they are all concentrated in very few pockets now. And places like the Bengal Buddhist Association are sustained by people coming and visiting, by people coming from other Buddhist. So as you can see, the many schools of Buddhism, Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana, and the one that is here is the Mahakabhi Nikaya, as you can see, which is the from Chittagong in Bangladesh. There was this Buddhist called I forget his name. So he came and he, in the year 1890, set up the Bengal Buddhist Association to revive Sri Kripa. That's what he was called. So Sri Kripa came and wanted to revive Buddhism and made this little complex. This little complex has a library, it has a meditation hall, it has a school, it has a charitable dispensary, and above all, it is a dharamshala, which means before the British introduced hotels, we used to have dharamshalas, and dharamshala is when you can stay in a place for a very small fee based on your community, based on generally your religion. Now, this is situated on one Buddhist temple street, and the interesting bit is there is no 2 or 3 or 4. So the one Buddhist temple street begins and ends with one Buddhist temple street because they did it just for this temple, just to commemorate this temple. So that's what I love about Calcutta, you know, like everyone is given a place of importance. Moving on, directly opposite the Bengal Buddhist Association, we see the Anglo-Indians Bow Barracks. Now, these were British barracks located on Bow Street, built in the First World War. And so they've completed 100 years after 2014. And they've They were Anglo-Indians. Once the British troops moved out, the Anglo-Indians were given to live in there. And Anglo-Indians have a very, very interesting backstory. Now, some of you may not like what I say, but that's the truth of how things happen. So the British wanted to, in the words of Lord Macaulay, he said that between us and the millions we govern, we need a people in between who are Indian in skin and blood, but European in their education, in their upbringing, in their moral judgments, whatever that meant. But he wanted people who looked Indian but behaved British, and he got his wish fulfilled through the Anglo-Indian community, which was a social engineering project, if you may call it. And the idea was that uh, they called it the sleeping dictionaries, which was you sleep with the native women and also learn a bit of the language in the course of the night. And children that are born from that union are mostly illegitimate, but because they are fathered by the British, they're supposed to have a natural loyalty towards the British. They're supposed to help the British run the country. So fill the army ranks, fill the police ranks, fill the administrative ranks, lay the railway network, lay the telephone network, be clerks and secretaries in offices. So all that was fulfilled by say 500,000 Anglo-Indians that were at the peak uh, of their inhabitants in India. Now, what happened was post-independence, they were unsure of the future in the country, so they started migrating en masse to greener pastures or to countries that they thought would welcome them. So they found a welcoming home in Australia, in the UK, in the US, wherever they could manage, they kind of moved out. But the Anglo-Indians in Calcutta are extremely popular because they have, as you can see the dancing here, they have this wonderful, wonderful festival called the Christmas Festival at Bow Barracks, and which is a wonderful community living space built in the, as I said, built by the Calcutta Improvement Trust around the First World War. And they are like really fun people. If you want to learn to jive, if you want to learn to do waltz, if you want to learn ballroom dancing, they are the people you go to. They know how to party, they know how to do music, they know how to, and world famous musicians have come out from the Indian community. Uh, One person in particular I would like to speak to you about is the person that you see standing on his balcony. So you see him, his name is Reginald Elbridge. Now, Reginald's grandfather was a white guy, a captain of a British merchant navy ship. Living in Hong Kong, he married a woman who was Singapore Chinese. Now, their ship was sailing towards Calcutta, but it was torpedoed by the Japanese. And the only survivors were Reginald's father. And Reginald's father went to Sri Lanka first and then came to Calcutta, joined the Calcutta police force, and then got this house to live in. So Reginald today flaunts he says, I'm not an Anglo-Indian, I'm a Eurasian. He's a very interesting, very colorful character if you meet him. And Anglo-Indians are known for their really colorful language with a lot of slang, very, very liberal with their slang words. And he's very proud to flaunt his grandfather's Freemason's certificate from his beautiful Singapore Chinese mother, grandmother, and all these things. If you visit Reginald and if you can endear yourself to him, then you can really get tales out from him. I took Debaka Banerjee when he was doing his Bhumkesh Pakshi, and you see him in the movie also. He's got a short scene there, but Debaka went bonkers, and he spent like a couple of hours with Reggie, just kind of hearing his story, and it was a fascinating time. So Reginald Elbridge, if you like, is from the Bow Barracks area. Now I could go on and on about Bow Barracks, but you must visit to get a real flavor of Bow Barracks. Moving on, the next community we encounter are the Parsis. Now, when we talk about the Parsis, we go back to, most of our visitors have absolutely no idea where the Parsis come from, what are they, what is the religion they follow, what are the basic tenets of their religion. So we go back really back, far back in history, and we talk about the Cyrus cylinder, which you can see on the bottom left corner. So the Cyrus cylinder is actually from the 6th century BC, when Cyrus the Great rescued Jews from the Babylonians, set them free, and created the first charter of human rights in the world. So the Zoroastrians were known to have created the first charter of human rights in the world. And from then, of course, there was a rise of Islam in Iran, and a few of them decided to not convert and move out and come to India. So when they came to India, the king of Gujarat, the famous story of him sending them a bowl of milk and them putting sugar in it and sending back, saying, allow us, we will only sweeten your milk, and them being allowed to stay on. And the rest, as they say, is history. But we often hear about the Bombay Parsis, we often hear about the famous Parsis, but we generally don't hear about the strong link that Parsis have with Calcutta. And there has been Calcutta Parsi theatre. There has been this famous Dharamshala where there's still a Parsi couple who will cook for you if you go and inform them in advance that you'd like to come over for a pure Parsi meal. They will cook for you. Then there is, of course, they are known for their charity. They are known for quite a few things. It's a wonderful, wonderful community. Only problem is in our walks, we go there more often than we see most Parsis going there because there are so few Parsis left in the city. There's like 1,100 people, they say. But they've been very, very active in very many spheres. Now, if I speak to you about the Christians, one could go on and on because Christians were here first with the Portuguese, or maybe even before that with the Armenians, and then carried on by all these missionaries that came in. But one particular missionary that stands out is this man that you see sitting with a Pandit and learning the Sanskrit language is William Carey. Now, William Carey, Joshua Marshman, and William Ward, they were supposed to be the three, the trio, the Shirampur trio, who tried their best to spread the word of Christianity. Now, I will read out a little passage from a day in the life of William Carey, and you will see that how much effort he was making in trying to understand and trying to spread the word of God that he believed was the ultimate word. So here in this letter that he's writing to a Baptist friend in England in the year 1806, he says, "I rose this day at 6:15, read a chapter in the Hebrew Bible, and spent time till 7 in private address to God, and then attended family prayer with the servants in Bengali. While tea was pouring out, I read a little Persian with the Munshi, read also before breakfast a portion of the scriptures in Hindustani. The moment breakfast was over, sat down to the translation of Ramayana from Sanskrit with the Pandit, continued this translation till 10 o'clock, at which time I went to the College of Fort William. When I returned home, I examined a proof sheet of the Bengali translation of Jeremiah, which took till dinner time. After dinner, translated greatest part of the 8th chapter of Matthew into Sanskrit. After 6, sat down with a Telugu Pandit to learn that language. I began to collect a few thoughts into the form of a sermon and preached in past 7. The congregation was gone by 9 o'clock. I then sat down to write to you. After this, I conclude the evening by reading a chapter in the Greek Testament and commending myself to God. I have never more time in a day than this, though the exercise vary." So that's a day in the life of William Carey. It's a very, very full, tiring day. And this is where we talk about the diversity of languages that exist in Calcutta. Any corner newspaper guy you pick up and you'll see that he has newspapers in at least 6 different languages, if not more. And that's the beauty of living in a multicultural, multi-dimensional, multilingual, multi-community, multi-religious city like Calcutta. And this is the diversity that we try to talk about in the course of this walk, and our visitors really, really appreciate it. That these are all communities that are cheek by jowl. They're just next to each other. They're not very far from each other. One spark and things could go wrong. But it's been ages since we've heard of communal flarings in Calcutta. So thanks to the ethos of the city. Now we come to the Calcutta Chinese. Do you know where the Hindi word for sugar, chini, comes from? Yes, it's the Calcutta Chinese that first introduced refined white sugar, and they called it chini shakkar, which means the Chinese sugar. And in time, that became shortened to just chini. So that means that it's chini means refined white sugar, and that's the term we use about its Chinese origins. So the Chinese in the late 1700s, Songachu came over with a bunch of his people, set up a sugar factory outside Calcutta in the which a place which is now named after him. It's called Achipur. And slowly they started coming and settling in Calcutta. The Cantonese came. They were the ones who were great furniture makers, and they really prided themselves in the art of furniture making, and they really looked down upon Indian furniture makers because they said Indian furniture makers are using too many nails and hammers. Good furniture must not have any nails or hammers or screws. They must just fit together. And that was a skill that they were really, really popular for. Then, of course, the other skill that we know Chinese were really popular for was shoemaking. The best handmade shoes of the country were made by the Chinese in Calcutta, and that was done by the Hakka community. So the Hakka were in leather and into food. The Cantonese were mostly into furniture. The Hupak were the dentists, the famous Chinese dentists, of which you'll cross the country, definitely across the city, but I'm sure there are plenty of Chinese dentists that roamed around and set up shop across different parts of India also. So dentistry was also a big vocation for them. And in the year in the year 1962, we had the Sino-Indian War, in which a lot of the Chinese in Calcutta were taken and put in a desert camp in Rajasthan. And that dealt a huge blow to the community, and they never recovered from that because they felt that if we could be labeled enemies and spies overnight, it means that we will never be safe in India. So post that, as soon as they found an opportunity, they started migrating out, and they mostly went to Toronto in Canada or Vancouver or wherever else. I've met my Chinese in Australia. I've met my Chinese friend in Sweden. I've met my Chinese friends all over. So they've migrated wherever they thought would be a better, greener pasture. On the bottom right is a very interesting uh, uh, room, which was back then in Farsi, it was called Chandu Khana, and in English, the opium dens. So that's a picture that was snapped by a Second World War American GI. And here you can see that people, so there were 400 licensed pipes, as you can see the pipes lying next to them. So there were 400 licensed pipes. You know, the British never banned anything for the good of mankind. Whatever they banned was always so they could monetize it. So opium was banned so they could make the pipes, they could license the pipes and renew the licenses every year and make money out of it. So of course, they cut through a big road, the Calcutta Improvement Trust, the same guys who built the Bow Barracks, also cut through a huge road through the old Chinatown to destroy the strong mesh that the community had amongst themselves and to kind of get greater access into the old Chinatown area. Now, because the old Chinatown was in the center of the city and they were doing a lot of leather tanning business, they were told to shift out further to a place called Tangra, which was then outside the city, but now it's become part of the city also. So they were told to shift out to Tangra, and that's where all the tanneries have now, which have further been shifted out, have all now been converted into a big, massive eatery. So the Chinese of Calcutta, if you ever come here, you will see have left a strong imprint. There is no chili chicken in China. There's only chili chicken in India, and that is thanks to the Calcutta Chinese. Of course, Jews also left a huge imprint on the city. The beautiful synagogues that they built. You know, a lot of our visitors who come on the walks, they say that it's the first time that they are entering a Jewish place of worship. Beth El Synagogue, Magen David Synagogue, Nave Shalom Synagogue, all beautiful old buildings crafted with a lot of effort and a lot of architectural beauty that you must visit and must see. So Calcutta used to be one of the six centers of Judaism in the world. And Jews in Calcutta came from Aleppo in Syria and Baghdad in Iraq. And even now, I mean, the number of Jews in Calcutta has reduced tremendously. We have less than 20 Jews in the city now, but they still run a very popular bakery inside Newmarket called the Nahum's Bakery. So if you ever come here, you must visit Nahum's Bakery and have their brownies, have their cakes, and have their beautiful creations, biscuits and fudge and whatnot. So Jews in Calcutta again left a huge imprint on the city. Armenians. Now, this is very interesting that the oldest grave, as you can see on the left of the screen, this is the tomb of Reza Bibi, wife of the late charitable Sukyas, who departed from this world to life eternal on 11 July 1630 AD. 1630 was when this tomb was created. That's before the Taj Mahal was built, for instance. It's amazing how far back that goes. So this becomes the oldest Christian cemetery and the oldest Christian church of the city because of its antiquity. So which shows that Armenians have been here for a long, long time. Yes, it's a proper country, Armenia, with its capital as Yerevan. And they were on great terms with the British. The British had passed an order that wherever there were 40 or more Armenians living together, the uh, the British would erect a temporary wooden church for them, which they could concretize if they so wished. So this was also the British were they were lending money to the British. They were doing businesses with them. Most of the British were coming as East India Trading Company servants, and they needed funding for whatever venturing that they wanted to do. So all this funding was all these communities, the Armenians, the Jews, the Parsis, the Marwaris, all of these people were in the business of lending money to the British and, of course, gaining favors in return because they were the eventual rule makers. Kabuliwalas from Afghanistan. Now, of course, they always, I mean, there's a beautiful story by Tagore that you must read. There's a movie on that. There's famous music that Manna they sang songs in there. And we meet them on the course of our walk. So we stop them for a cup of tea. We share a cup of tea with them at our neighborhood tea stall. And but what they essentially do is money lending. So they are loan sharks. But it's always done under the garb of being. I mean, they also do dry fruits business and shawls business. Marwadis of the city, almost 20% of the city is Marwadi, which is amazing. I mean, they are there are more than like 15, like 1.5 million Marwadis in Calcutta, 15 lakh Marwadis in Calcutta, and including yours truly. So there's tons of Marwadis who've been here from a long, long time. Mr. G.D. Birla, Mr. Ellen Mittal, Mr. Lohia, and this mosque-like building is actually a women's bathing ghat. So it's called Ramchandra Goenka Zenana Bathing Ghat, women's bathing ghat. So Marwadis, of course, they run the electricity in the city, they run the big corporations, they run the real estate companies, they literally run the city because most of the Marwadis that moved here were banyas, and they contributed a tremendous amount to the city and made a lot of money from the city also. I'll pass on the rest of this to Anirban. Anirban, are you there?
Yep,
Okay. Would you like to take over?
yep. Thank you. So that
Okay.
was quite a highlight of the city. So many different communities have been living here together and exploring trading opportunities because the British, who one of the first settlement from the west, they came here and started making the huge port that we see by the riverside of the southern part of the Ganges. And so they literally made the White Town a small copy of the British capital, London. And we remember walking around the White Town, and the first video of the film that has been shown, like it represents the heart of the city, which is popularly known as Dalhousie Square or BBD Bagh. And there are various fascinating stories of multiple monuments across Dalhousie Square. And one of the many interesting stories I remember was of the Scottish Church, which is known as the St Andrew's Kirk. If you walk towards the old Courthouse Street, which used to be the old court, and once upon a time the Fort William College even. So that was literally made a Scottish church later on, and the priest of the father of the church kind of tried to make an exemplary version better than the St. John's, which was the first church built in. And St. John's was copied from the style of St. Martin's in the Fields from London. And so the Bishop of Calcutta back then said that you cannot really make a higher spire than St. John's. But on the contrary, on a higher spire of the St. Andrew's Kirk was made, and the father intentionally placed a rooster bird at the top of it to make really a fun fact of the matter. And the building that we see here, it's presently known as GPO, the General Post Office, one of the largest post office buildings of the country, of course. And initially, before this was built, there was the old Fort William. Old Fort William was, of course, because the White Town was precisely very small, and the fort was nearly present here. But we have a very controversial story that European used to refer to. Whenever they got a posting in Calcutta, they used to refer to it. No, no, I'm not going to the black hole of the city, because there was an infamous story that the British started teaching in their schools and have been doing since the very recent time, that around 123 men, those were captured by the Nawab, earlier Nawab Shirajuddaullah's army, and have been buried alive in a hole, which was basically on the destroyed fort. Now there are a lot of atrocities on this story because there's, of course, a British version and there was the actual version of the story. So moving on, we see the Victoria Memorial. Of course, it's right at the heart of the center of the city, surrounded by huge, lush gardens, and people from North Calcutta, also from South Calcutta, the Bengali merchants. They have been, of course, they have been exploring multiple trade opportunities, including uh, Prince Dwarkanath Tagore, I remember, and the great grandfather of the poet Tagore, who was literally known for its opium clipper, and later on coal trade as well. So everyone kind of worshipped Queen Victoria when she became the Empress of India. And when she passed away, no other city in the whole world lost a tons like Calcutta. So everyone kind of donated to make this monument happen. It's built with a Makana marble. It's a representation of an Indo-Saracenic style, which is basically a lot of buildings in a lot of monuments, including high courts in Uttar Pradesh, Kanpur, were built in the Indian and European style mix. So kind of that. And moving on to the next slide, which is we have been doing walking tours since around 13 years, as my colleague was saying. And Calcutta as a city, of course, it's been a tremendously diverse history of the theater, cinema, and everything. And of course, everything comes from a photographer's eye. As a famous American photojournalist Leonard Reed quoted that, everything that we create as a photographer, it's basically a personification of our character. And walking around in the streets of Calcutta really gives you that option, because the street life, as Roop ma'am was initially saying, that it's so open. Because if you go to the backlands of Kumartuli, you don't really need to knock anyone's door and see what is happening. It's happening in front of your eyes, which is basically the artisans doing work, the vendors doing in the Bada Bazaar, they are doing auctions all the time, the wholesale markets happening. So it's throughout the lively city that you can explore, and a lot of opportunities, including the famous Howrah Bridge. You cannot see that bridge ever resting. So moving on to the next slide, you will see, of course, a photograph of the Kumotuli artisan. I think, can I move to the next slide? Yep. So yeah, as Rupam was initially saying that, a city for known for its festivals. It's a Kali idol face that the artisan is drawing and kind of shaping it to the last shape. It's a beautiful photograph. And while walking around Kumartule, nearing to the Diwali or the Durga Puja time, it's a fascinating time to explore. So throughout the whole webinar, we have been on talking about the multicultural part of the city, but it has many facets, because the North Calcutta itself, it's one of my favorite pockets to walk around in the bylands, and you can explore tremendous opportunities of photography. And just like if you're boarding after the COVID-19 lockdown, if you can venture around on one of the walks, walking around this and street photography in Calcutta, it's really fascinating. And of course, the city which has started by the river, which we could not really speak a lot on this conference, which is basically a fascinating river life that you will see on different ghats of the city, which is much different than the other ghats of the Ganges. And these are the list of the different other walks that we do on our course. And we will like to thank you everyone for joining this webinar with us. And of course, the Ministry of Tourism and everyone associated, the tech team, of course, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. I just rushed through because we
Yes,
really want
Iftikhar,
to
I
take
think
some
really
questions.
quick, takes the 3 quick questions, and the rest of the things we can keep answering on the YouTube links later.
Sure.
So while you are scanning what you want to answer, I'll quickly add something for a lot of people that wasn't it like
Sure.
a wow session? And what I'm so happy about is that a lot of people are dissatisfied. And you know why? They're like, this is not enough. You're only talking of. So that's the best part. Thank you so much, all the participants, for encouraging us, because everybody seems to be saying, why are we only talking of this? Why aren't we talking of that? Why aren't we talking of that? So let me say that we'll be coming back to you with many such webinars. We need your support. We need your participation. That's all we need from you. Just keep joining us. And not only now that we are home, but even after that. Currently, we'll be doing the webinars a bit more frequently. We'll do them every alternate day. But hopefully, COVID will be very soon behind us. We would have beaten it, and we shall keep the tradition on till you guys just get a habit of it. You know, you say 11 a.m. Oh, it's time to log on. Dekho apna desh. Let me see some part of my country today. So we are going to make a habit out of it. Now, go ahead, Iftikhar.
Why was the name changed from Calcutta to Kolkata? Now, let me tell you,
Yeah, that's one of the questions.
all three names have always been in. So they have always Kolkata, the Bengal have always called it Kolkata, and the English speakers have always called it Calcutta. Now, nobody knows why the names came about. There are lots of ways. Some say because they were the British officer was going and a lady was attacked on the head. He pointed to the ground and he asked, "What's the name of this place?" Or he's asking, he wants to buy the hay and he wants to know when did she cut it. So she told him Calcutta. So that's why the name became Calcutta or Calcutta. But nobody really knows. There are lots of theories of why Calcutta is called Calcutta. But all the names have always been in existence.
So one last question, Iftikhar, that you want to address, and then we'll close it.
In a minute. Somebody's asking if Bow Barracks is the only Anglo-Indian area. No, that's not true. Bow Barracks is one of the Anglo-Indian areas, being the area around Elliott Road and Royd Street. And now a big chunk of them reside in what is known as Picnic Gardens, which is towards EM Bypass, much further away from the old city, more closer to the new town areas. As we will, as Mrs. Bra said, we will keep answering by text or on YouTube comments. So much.
The clock I think just went a little faster. There's so much to cover, and so thank you. I must assure everybody that you've raised so many things that why aren't we talking of other things of Calcutta? We will, and I'm sure our teams will work together to bring you the beautiful Vishnupur temples, the Belur Mutt, the Swami Ramakrishna Mission founded by Swami Vivekanand. That itself is a place to spend, I think, a whole webinar on. The beautiful saris of Bengal. I'm wearing one today. I'm wearing a Dhakai. So I think we can do one on that. We can do so many webinars only on Calcutta. But We will be moving from Calcutta, and on 18th, it's the World Heritage Day, and we shall be bringing to you two different parts of India on 18th. We shall be going to the south of India to Mamlapuram, which is also known by the name of Mahabalipuram, a 1 hour session from 11 a.m. to 12 noon. And from 12 noon to 1 p.m., we have the Humayun's tomb and the Sundar Nursery in Delhi. So we would be traversing from the south to the north of India. And we want to keep the spirit of Dekho Apna Desh going. And therefore, we are going to keep making you travel the entire length and breadth of this incredible country of ours. Stay home, stay safe, plan your travels for the future, and keep hooking on with us into our webinars. Keep sending inputs, comments, critiques, criticism. Most welcome. It will help us to improve. It will help us to get better. I once again want to thank both the presenters, my team at Calcutta, my team in Delhi, and most important, NEGD, Silohu, we cannot exist without you. Thank you for standing with us. And most importantly, all the participants who've shown so much interest and who participated with us and encouraging us. Thanks for joining. See you again, 11 a.m., 18th April, World Heritage Day. Thank you very much.